This is a recording to show how to use MallinCam LITE, the Mac version of the software, with a DS10c. To start off, I'm going to give you some information on the computer I'm using. It's about a 4-year-old reconditioned MacBook Pro, 2.6 gigahertz processor i5 with 8 gigs of RAM. There's the system report. 1 processor, 2 cores. So that gives you an idea of what kind of machine I'm using. So I'm going to close this and I'm going to start MallinCam LITE. I have discovered a DS10c connected to one of the 2 USB 3 ports. And I have a 50mm lens attached to the camera, and I'm going to click on it, and there it starts. I'm going to increase the gain. Oh, it's in auto exposure mode. Unclick that.
I'm coming for you just a minute.
And there's the image of a few pictures on the wall. Let me see if I can get something more familiar on. I'm aiming at a bookshelf in the distance. So the camera is right now at maximum resolution. You can change the resolution. And you could change the resolution of the individual snaps if you want. Now I'm going to go back to default. Every time you change it, you hear the fan speed up, slow down. So the camera's running. Right now I have the gain at 46. Maximum gain is 160. And you can see how the camera responds to increases in gain. Minimum gain. About half gain. Max gain. The main things you'll be using during capturing of DSOs is exposure time and gain. Right now I'm going to lower the gain to about 40, which is 1/4 gain. And here's the exposure right now, is about 1/3 of a second, 350 milliseconds. That's 2.2 seconds. About a half second. So you can see how the image responds to changes in exposure. That's 13 seconds. That's way too much. .1 seconds. So those are the main exposure parameters you'll adjust will be exposure time and gain. White balance. you can take your little box and drag it around. You should be able to resize it. I guess you can't. And if you drag it somewhere you want it, hit white balance, what it does, it will sample and change the settings to conform to the colors it detects. See, there's defaults, 6500, 1000 tint. It's still white balance in a different area. See, it lowered the color temperature a little bit and the tint a little bit. I'm going to go back to defaults. Those are things you'll play with while you're observing targets. Color balance. Right now they're set to defaults. Gamma will make it darker. The higher gamma. It'll make it lighter. Lower gamma. Brightness does exactly what it says. Brightens the image or darkens the image. Saturation increases the color levels. When you increase the saturation, you'll see the colors can become really overpowering. If you reduce the saturation, you're moving towards a black and white grayscale image because you're taking color out of the image. Back to defaults. U. That changes the balance between red and blue and green. Minimum is more to the blue. It's more to the violet. But you'll see the effects of adjusting U when you're looking at a deep sky target. Back to defaults. Power frequency generally kept just at DC. Frame rate, generally you would keep the frame rate to low. It's less demanding on the system resources. Color gray. You can force the image to gray just by clicking a button. And if you want the color back, click color. Okay, flip. You can flip the picture horizontally, vertically, or both. Sampling I have not played with. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Oh, you can't really change it either. Sampling. Bit depth. 8 bits is generally what I use. 14 bits gives you a greater color balance. But generally I'll keep it at 8. Histogram. This shows you the array of colors based upon signal strength. You can see that the curve is peaked to the left. If you increase the exposure time, you increase the gain and the peak will get higher. You can also, if you want to make the image brighter, you can move the white point over to the left. Want to make the image darker, you can move the black point to the right. You got to be careful that you don't start clipping data as you move across your data graph. Then the image is going to get darker and darker because you're losing data by the positioning of where these lines are. You can always go back to defaults. That's the 0 to 255. Let me see what other functions they have. Dark field correction. Dark is important when looking at deep sky targets, especially with higher gain or longer exposures of both. As the sensor warms up, it will develop what are called hot and warm pixels, pixels that will glow at different colors. And the way you would capture the darks is you would cover your telescope. So let me put the cap on the lens. So now the cap is on the lens. And if you want to see what happens, you could try pushing the exposure, the gain higher. You can put the exposure say to a minute, and let's see what happens with the image that is picked up. It should show what people call colorful confetti. It is the warm pixels glowing with different colors. Let's see how they show up. And another way to aggravate the appearance of them is to bring the histogram over, say 0 to 100. I see a few red glowing pixels now. Let it run a little bit. There's not that many pixels that are glowing. But be that as it may, so you have a 1 second exposure, maximum gain. And if you wanted to capture darks, you would say, how many do you want? And generally, say just we'll get 3 and click capture. And you will eventually see a countdown 1 of 3. There's 1 dark. It's going to take 2 more minutes to capture the other 2 darks. close to capturing the next dark. There's two darks. And in another minute, the third dark will be captured. And as soon as it's captured, the counter will go away. I guess I should have tried a shorter exposure for this test. So we're still at 2 of 3. Counter just went away, meaning it captured the 3 darks. Then click this box, and now it is applying the dark that you just captured, which is an average of those 3 darks. It's being applied to all future images. So the next one that pops up should be relatively clean. Let's see what happens. There it is, black. So it did apply the dark. So I'm going to go back and reduce the exposure time to something fairly short. I'm going to reduce the gain down to 40 again. Let me uncap the scope. I guess I can disable the dark for now because we don't need a dark with a real short exposure. So now we're back at 0.6 of a second. The gain's around 40. You asked about, can you go to a full screen? That's a good question. I never did try that. View. See if there's a full screen here. Nope, there is no full screen. Sorry about that. So it doesn't appear that there's a full screen option. But that is a quick video on how to use the different parameters in MallinCam LITE software for Mac.